Hi, I'm Amy.
And I'm Kirsty.
And this is our podcast covering the highs, lows and realities of parenting a child with neurodiversity.
Each week we'll be sharing updates from our lives and hearing from a variety of guests about their advice and experiences.
This is Love Needs No Words. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Love Needs No Words. This week we're joined by Nicola Brassington. Nicola's son Marlon is 4 years old and has cerebral palsy. Marlon is a wheelchair user but learning to walk with a walker. Nicola, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
So cerebral palsy is a lifelong condition that affects movement and coordination. It's typically caused by a problem with the brain that develops before, during, or soon after birth. What would you say were the signs you first noticed in Marlon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably typical of experiences that you've had. It's just missed milestones. So it was probably, it was during the pandemic, which made it really difficult to keep track of milestones anyway. And he was my first child, so I didn't really have a point of comparison. But he took a long time to sit up unaided. And even when he did, he wasn't particularly stable. He then was really slow crawling. And actually, when he first started to crawl, he would do like commando crawling with just his arms. And his legs would just be like behind. And I kept like trying to get him on his knees to crawl. And he would just go flat and fall with his arms. And so I started to go to a baby group probably when he was about 9 months, I would say, because it was lockdown, so they'd been closed. And that's when I really started to pick up on it. And then it was his 12-month checkup back at the hospital where we saw a specialist paediatrician because he'd been born prematurely. And they said everything was fine. They were like, premature children can take up to 2 years to catch up with milestones. There's nothing to worry about. And I just had this feeling, the classic pit of your stomach, like mum anxiety. I just in my gut knew that there was something different about the way he moved. And I said, okay, I would just really love to have a second opinion. And like, can I see a physiotherapist who might be able to offer me some support in getting him more mobile? So they said, okay, I don't think it's necessary, but if you would feel, you really want to insist on that, then I can request it. So then waited, and he was probably just 13 months or so when we saw the physio. Luckily, it was quite quick. And straight away, they said, you've done the right thing by insisting on coming to see us. We think you're right, that there is something there. And at first I was relieved because I was like, well, finally, it's like somebody's listening to me.
Yeah.
And then within a week, we'd seen another paediatrician who gave us their thoughts that he had cerebral palsy, which was then confirmed about a month later with an MRI scan. And for those of you that don't know, cerebral palsy is a really big spectrum, and there's typically people can be affected either their upper body or their lower body or their right side of their body or their left side of their body, or maybe all four areas. And for Marlon, he's not on the severe end of that. He's probably like mid like level abilities, I would say, with his movement, and it's predominantly just his lower body. So his arms and his fine motor skills are pretty unaffected, but it's just the use of his legs that he needs more support with. So he is predominantly in a wheelchair, but he does have a little walking frame, and he uses that every day at school, at lunchtimes, etc. But yeah, it was probably like the first year of his life, we were blissfully unaware that there was any issue. And then at 14 months, he was diagnosed with that, which was just like, wow, where did that come from? It was like a kick in the gut, like the very first time that they said the words cerebral palsy. I just remember being in this meeting room, and it's like, in movies, sometimes you see like the whole room just sort of spins and like falls out of focus. It was a bit like that. I just felt I was having this out of body experience, just went into complete shock, went home and just was like, just in shock. I had to go to bed. I was like shivering, like without, adrenaline, I guess. I'm like physically just so shocked by what we were going through. And actually, we've got some good friends whose daughter is probably like 14 and has got cerebral palsy. So we were very aware of like what it was and how people are affected. So I think actually the medical team called me the day after they'd had our meeting, and they said, we're really sorry. We should have softened the blow a little bit. We just want to check if you're okay. It was quite clear that you knew what we were talking about when, we told you our diagnosis. So anyway, it was very, very hard at first. We were completely shocked. And I think you go through this certain level of grieving with any diagnosis. But really, that was the start of us then getting the right support for him. And that was the start of a really positive journey from there on in. And I think that although it was really hard, it kind of needed to happen for us to then get on the right treatment path. So it was positive after that.
Had you done any Googling before before that appointment where you got told? Because you said that you had a gut feeling. I think loads of us can relate to that, where you just think, something's amiss here. I'm not quite sure what it is. Had you Googled anything beforehand?
No, not at all. I thought maybe it was like muscle tone or a slight delay, or I really never thought it was a disability. I thought it would be like a short-term fix of something that we would get additional support with. And I stayed away from Google. And even when we had the diagnosis, I found it really hard to go online. Even the Facebook groups and things, I was just in complete shock and denial. I wouldn't engage with it. And for a long time, for a little bit of time until we actually had the MRI, I was convinced that they'd got it wrong. Right. And I remember my husband being like, Nicola, they're pediatricians. They don't get things like this wrong. They might get it wrong for other things, but if they think it's a physical disability and they can see that, they wouldn't be going through all of this unless they were pretty sure. And I was still in denial. But I didn't really Google much. But as I said, we already knew somebody relatively close to us that had the disability, so we already had quite a good understanding of what it was, I guess.
That must have really helped. But at that point, did you know about the different levels? Because I guess there's the fear, isn't there, of well, what does this mean for our future? What, we all had these fears when we get the diagnosis. So was that sort of what you were struggling with, sort of coming to terms with?
Yeah, definitely. And we didn't have much to hold on to, I guess, because they couldn't predict at that point any of his abilities. So at that point it was okay, he's delayed with crawling and standing and walking. I've now got, as you know, a 2-year-old, and she's like a typical child, and she was walking on her first birthday, whereas Marlon, he could just crawl with his arms at that point. So it was really clear now, knowing what I know, having seen 2 children. But yeah, it was quite obvious, I guess, to other people, but not to us. And I think knowing what we know now about the spectrum, there's so many different ways people can be affected physically and cognitively. And when we had the diagnosis, they couldn't give us any kind of clue as to where Marlon would be. It was just that his brain had that sort of injury. So we really didn't have any reassurance on, what to expect. It was just wait and see. And as he's grown, he's going to be 5 in May. He started school last September. As we get further and further into his journey, we're starting to see what he is capable of. And, he's got fantastic cognitive ability. I had his parents' evening last week, and his teacher was he's top in maths. He's absolutely obsessed with them.
Amazing.
So well. But we had no, we had no guarantee, and we didn't know whether that would be the case. And even when he was at nursery, the nursery that he went to were really bad at SEN provision. So, it was probably less than 12 months ago where they were saying to me, we think he's behind on these milestones. We can only see him start to understand colours. And I was like, whose child are you talking about? He's fantastic at all these things. He's way overperforming on some of these milestones. But it wasn't really until he got to school that we could really sort of reliably say that his cognitive abilities were unaffected. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard, I think, when you first get that diagnosis, because you just don't know. You have to wait and see. So we've been living with it now for nearly 4 years, and I think we're now just starting to get a full picture of his abilities and what it will mean long term.
How has it affected his life so far, would you say?
So we really try and keep things relatively normal for him, I would say. Up until May of last year, he wasn't really aware of his disability at all. He'd never had a wheelchair. We would just carry him around, or he would crawl, or he'd be in a pushchair. And then he had a surgery at Great Ormond Street in May last year, which kind of changed his abilities. So the surgery was quite intense. It was like a 5-hour spinal surgery, and it's amazing. They basically cut the nerves that aren't working properly so that the brain has more control over his muscles. And it was a really funny time because that's been a very positive surgery, and it gave Marlon a lot more control and a lot more mobility. But with immediate effect, he was in a wheelchair because he was recovering and recuperating, and he probably would have needed a wheelchair at some point anyway, but that just brought it forward. So I often say to friends, it's like I went into hospital with a toddler and I came out with like a disabled child, because it was just straight away he was in a wheelchair. And I think that was the first time that he started to realize that there was something different. And for us, that kind of brought a lot of it, like urgency in adapting. So we have like extra handrails outside our house and on our stairs. You know, we got like a standing frame for the toilet for him at our house and at school. And so it kind of brought a lot of adaptations to the forefront that we would have needed long term. And it took a little bit of adapting. But there are loads of really great adaptations that have been, you know, offered to us through the NHS as part of that, and that have made his life easier. So yeah, it's been probably a normal life so far for him, I would say. And now that he's in this wheelchair and he started at school, I think that's the first time that he's really seen other children, you know, in the playground. And I guess he now realizes the difference. But we do, where possible, we really try and just give him a normal experience. Like we just got back from holiday, we went to Thailand to a beach resort, which is like not wheelchair friendly at all. So we're there like carrying him around, and elephant trek, where my husband had to carry him on his shoulders through the whole jungle trekking with an elephant. And at one point I was thinking, maybe we should look into more adaptive holidays rather than trying to stick with the mainstream. Yeah, but for the most part, we get by relatively, you know, unaffected, I would say.
Did he ask you questions at that point where he had his surgery? Did it kind of force the conversation that you needed to have with him around his disability? Because lots of us are in this position where you're kind of thinking, is there that moment that I'm going to share with them that they may have cerebral palsy, autism, ADHD, whatever diagnosis might be? Or am I just going to kind of let it naturally kind of happen? It's hard to know, isn't it, what the best thing to do is, but I guess maybe in the circumstance that you were in, it maybe forced your hand to have that conversation at that point.
Yeah, 100%. Like with many things, it kind of forced me directly into it, like, you know, with the before and after. But yeah, before, we'd never broached the conversation with him. I'd bought books and been like, oh, you know, here's someone in a wheelchair, you know, Peppa Pig, there's always someone in a wheelchair. So I would kind of talk about that, but not about him. And then before the surgery, I was really thinking, like, how do I start positioning this? So I bought a book that was about having a disability, and I read it to him. And I was sort of like, well, you know, you've got a disability, and this is going to be like something that you get comfortable with. And he just didn't grasp it. But at that point, he wasn't even 4. He was like just about to turn 4. And he really just ignored it and just carried on. And so I just thought, okay, well, in his own time, when he can grasp it, he will come to me. And then after the surgery, being in a wheelchair, he would ask questions like, why do I have to have this? Why do I have to have physio? You know, and I was always putting it to him like very positively, like, this is going to make you stronger and better, and the wheelchair is going to help you get around, and, you know, you're not always going to need it, but this is just to help you in the short term, and the more you work hard at physio, the less you're going to need it. And I think then it started to sink in, but it was only really when he went to school, I think, that he's probably been confronted with people taking an interest. You know, like I've been at public places with him where people have been like, why does he have that walking frame? Or like, why is he in a wheelchair? You know, and it's not out of a place of like meanness in children. They're just so curious.
Yeah.
And he has like little splints on his ankles that basically like plastic molds that give him support. And kids are so fascinated by them because they have prints on them. So he's got like Batman on one foot and like Spider-Man on the other foot. So they're quite bright, and kids are always like, what are these? You know? So yeah, I think he hasn't always understood, but more so going to school where he's seen so many peers. I think now he gets it. And now I try and talk to him about it relatively lightweight, but just frequently. So like, that's like you've got a disability, or, and I really try and put a positive light on it. Like I often say to him, you're going to see the best of people and you're going to see the best of the world. And I truly believe that, because he's so nice to him. And especially in the wheelchair, I think people often like just really feel for him. So, I've had people buy me a coffee and buy him sweets before.
Oh, that's so kind.
Yeah, and people, like when we were on holiday, people were giving him things in gift shops and stuff. Like people always make conversation with him, try and make him laugh. Like, so I do think that as hard as it is coming to terms with a disability, and I'm sure that he will face many challenges, I really believe that he will see the best in people, and people will be going out of their way to help him and be kind to him. And I see that now with the children at school as well. Some of them are just so lovely and so inclusive, and he knows so many people in the school because he stands out, and especially young girls, they want to like help him and look after him. They're so caring. So yeah,
that's really nice. I can sense your positivity. I think as a parent, it's so important to just keep relaying all those messages, because we've had guests on before that have had children in wheelchairs, and they said all they want is to be seen. And I think it's really important. And so to know that he's been out and about and he is being seen and feeling that is really lovely. And I'm sure there's been times, although you've got a positive outlook now, that I'm sure there were times that you never thought he would be able to walk, let alone see his determination now. So that must be really incredible for you both as parents.
Definitely. I think, it's the highs and lows. There's some really extreme lows. I haven't always been so positive. So I've had my own journey of acceptance to go on, I would say. But you do get like extreme highs and extreme lows. And the highs, I think when you do see the progress and you see how hard they're working, and I get great feedback about him, from school or just other people, I just feel so incredibly proud. And I know he will have to work harder for a lot of things, but I do think there'll be so much reward for him. And, he will feel proud of himself in the same way that I do. And yeah, I think I'm quite an optimistic person by nature anyway, but I do think, being on that journey, you just have to accept that there will be lows. And there've definitely been times where I've felt like it, sometimes I felt like a ship in a storm, and there's like waves crashing of like just new things that you've discovered about the diagnosis, or new medicine that you've got to try, or like another appointment you have to go to, and I'm like trying to keep the ship straight. But I do think that you've just got to accept the lows and just remind yourself that there will be a brighter time ahead, and that you've got to take your lessons and your learnings and just plow on, and that you will feel really positive about things when the time's right and when you do see the progress. And that will be 10 times the positivity of like mainstream parents.
I agree. I think it's those moments of pride. Like when you were talking, I was thinking, I wonder if she's going to say that she's proud, because I think they're the moments you see a struggle, or you see a perceived struggle that you think, okay, this is going to be challenging for them, and they seem to overcome it, whether that be because it wasn't even a struggle but you thought it was going to be, or genuinely they've had to work really hard at it, and it's such, you just are like, yes, you're so behind them, aren't you? So yeah, I really can see what you mean by the highs and the lows. The highs feel higher, don't they, in some way, things that are maybe missed because they're just kind of taken for granted, but you think, wow, what you've had to overcome to reach that is mammoth.
Yeah, I can't remember this quote exactly, which is something along the lines of, the off-beaten track is harder, but in that track flowers grow. Like there's little windows of optimism and positivity, and they're the things that you need to like wait for and celebrate. And I've always found as well, the things that I've been so anxious about have been a big deal to me, but he's always found it easier than I have, like the school, getting used to school. And I just started a new job last week, and he's going to RAP now, and I was really worried again how that would go, but he's just
taking it in stride. Yeah,
it's so adaptable, aren't they, at this age?
And what sort of the future diagnosis for him? And for those that don't know much about cerebral palsy, you say that it can differ from person to person. So what does that kind of look like as well?
It's not a debilitating illness, it's not progressive, so it doesn't get reverse, if you like. So his ability was his ability when he was born. It's not going to get, you know, better or worse in many ways. So for him, physio is the main thing that will help him, because it builds strength in his muscles and you know, trains his brain to have, because it is harder for his brain to control his muscles. So regular physio really helps. He had a surgery last year, as I said, and there's a couple of other surgeries that might be an option further down the line, but it's mostly just keeping up with his growth and making sure his muscles have that flexibility and tone to keep up with his growth. So different people have different levels of ability in their legs and their arms, and some people might be tube fed with cerebral palsy, some people might communicate with a eye tracking device, or you know, other tools. It's just such a broad spectrum, and quite often it will be coupled with other complex needs as well. So it's yeah, it's no one size fits all, unfortunately. It's you just have to kind of wait to see as the milestones come whether he's capable of them or not.
And when you were looking for a school for him, did you have to think about that sort of, even the building and how it could adapt to his needs? I mean, even that must have been quite the challenge.
Really hard, because we live in a little village and there's 3 schools in neighbouring villages, and you know, I went to see them all, and there was only one that would have been even accessible for him in any way. So one of them, you know, everywhere I went, the corridors were really small and wouldn't have really fit a wheelchair. There was steps, pretty much like tiny little steps just everywhere. And then another school in another village, when I called them, they were like, yeah, you can come and have a look, but just so you know, all the classrooms are split level, so I'm not sure how we'll make that work. Okay. We won't go there then. And then one would have worked, but just didn't feel like the right fit for him. But I'd looked around so many schools. I probably looked around about 15 schools.
Yeah.
And then the one that I chose in the end, it just felt like the perfect fit for him from the minute I walked through the door. And they've been amazing. They had a child in a wheelchair before, and they've got a girl there who's in a walking frame as well. So everything wasn't like custom built, but everything was already adapted. And it's a mainstream school, but they're just very, very inclusive, and they've worked with me, you know, been very flexible for whatever we need. And it just filters through the school. You can see it in the way that they run the curriculum and the trips that they do, and just how all the other children are with each other. And yeah, for anyone looking at schools, I would say, you know, again, trust your instinct and don't settle if you're not happy. You know, our school, it's not our closest school. It's probably 20 minutes away from our house, so about 40 minutes return journey, which isn't, you know, the most convenient, but it's 100% been the right choice for him. And I can see he's just thrived while he's been there, and it's been so lovely to see.
I always say that they thrive in the best environment, and it's so true. They really do. And all you want for them is to go in happy and be enjoying their day. That's it. I'd drive however long it took, as long as I knew he was happy.
You just make it work. And you know, I'm in the process of applying for transport now, because he'll be 5 in a couple of months.
Yeah.
And so there's just ways to make it work. And I think, you know, it's definitely been the right decision for him.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you were talking about the children at the school being really inclusive and kind, and that's probably partly to do with the culture of the school, because actually if the school's adapted and adaptable for children like that, then the way they teach, the way that they, like you say, run their curriculum is all going to be centered around that. And that doesn't matter what disability necessarily a child has, you're probably going to feel that as a parent of a child with a disability. So you wonder how some schools seem to be getting it so wrong, when it doesn't seem, you know, it seems entirely possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I could tell actually when we were looking around, the SEN lead was the deputy head, and now has since become the head teacher. And so you can just tell that they really value, you know, their SEN program is invested in, and it's not just like a sideline, it's taken really seriously at the school. It filters into the culture. You know, it's like when you have a job, the culture is so prevalent, and you know how the leadership is and how the business is run. You feel that as an employee, and that must be Marlon's experience of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great to hear. And your overall journey as well. have you been able to sort of get support for him quite easily? We talk quite a lot on the podcast about the difficulty we have with the HCPs and getting funding and all that side of things. Have you found that struggle, or has it been quite straightforward for you?
It's been a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. And I think it's probably one of the most frustrating things in my experience about having a disabled child is that side of things.
Yeah.
It just feels like there's forever a fight or a battle or paperwork, or it just feels like an admin to-do list sometimes. Even down from the very first diagnosis, we went on a waiting list for physio. That waiting list was like quite long. I think maybe like 6 months or something, and we just had the diagnosis, so it was like, somebody help me, please.
Yeah.
And then waiting lists for every individual service that we need, and nothing being coordinated. And then also the EHCP process it's just completely broken, in my opinion, and needs a lot of work. Just the way it all comes together is a mess. And so we applied through our nursery and it got rejected. Then I applied a second time directly to sort of challenge that, and again it got rejected. I'm like, he's got a physical disability, like what more evidence do I need to provide?
Yeah.
He can't walk. And they kept saying he doesn't need any additional support because he's not at school yet. And I was like, I know, but I need to do the school application, so I need it before school. It was horrible. It really brought me to tears. Like it defeated me.
Frustration of literally needing to see your child either at crisis point or at a point where they can't access, whether it be school or whatever, because physically they can't get there. How is there a system that waits for those points before proactively dealing with it? Like you can relatively work out what's going to happen in a lot of these situations, so why are you waiting all the time? And that's what it feels like. It feels like you're constantly fighting to not get to that point where they are then held back, where they are then at a disadvantage.
I mean,
that's what I find so frustrating.
I feel like the educational system and the NHS should be connected, and that should work. It should just be kind of like automated. He's got a diagnosis, he gets a disability allowance. It should trickle through to the schools, that we don't have to prove that and provide evidence of that. That should just already be, because it makes your life as a SEN parent just so tricky. But I will say, since we've had the EHCP, it's been much, much easier. That's in place. We review it regularly with the school now, and so hopefully it will be a bit easier going forward. But the other one, like wheelchair services, is terrible. The occupational health, in terms of getting different equipment that we need, it's just such a rubbish. It's rubbish across the board. I think we're in quite a fortunate position where we pay for a private physio as well as the NHS physio, and that's been great for me over the years, especially when we first had that diagnosis. We found a really great local physio, and that just sort of changed everything, because they became almost like a coach for me. So kind of give me their point of view on like how to bring together the whole medical system, and like what kind of tests to ask for, or like this medication you should ask if you can trial it, and here's the surgery that you might want to think about. And if it hadn't been for me being armed with a bit of that knowledge, I don't think a lot of things would have happened. Like I found through all the medical appointments, I have to chase it down. Like even the surgery, one doctor was like, no, we don't do that anymore on the NHS. And I was like, yes, you do. Here's the website. Here's the page that I found. And, you're just faced with constant hurdle after hurdle and so having that private physio, she really coached me and it sort of showed me the way, and often became like such a huge source of support. She was almost like a shoulder to cry on at times when I was so overwhelmed and just frustrated by things. So I would say if you are in that position, I found that investment to be really valuable, for not only for Marlon but also for me. And I feel for the clinicians and the individuals, because they provide incredible services, but people just can't access them, and then you get frustrated. And it's really tricky. It's really hard. I think the hardest thing on the journey so far.
I agree. I've had times where I've been in despair over that, and his diagnosis and everything else has kind of taken a back seat. The frustration is trying to get him the support. But what frustrates me the most, we talked a bit about it last week, is this early intervention is key. And then you try and get the help early and you're just stopped. It feels like at every hurdle. And it's like, how am I meant to help him if you're not helping me help him?
Yeah.
So yeah, we were the same, having to pay privately for a speech and language therapist. We would have still been waiting if he'd been on the NHS for someone to support him. And through her, you know, he's getting sort of more and more speech. And if it wasn't for her, I would have been a complete mess as well. I wouldn't have even know where to start to help him with his speech. So yeah, I completely agree. I think if you're in a position to be able to do it, it's money well spent, isn't it?
And the other thing I find frustrating is it's so different which part of the country you live in. You know, so I
Yeah.
like ones online with similar conditions that their children have, and it varies drastically. Like the level of access to physios that you get, the kind of equipment that you can access. You know, specialist shoes or provisions. It's just it should be nationwide service, but in my opinion, it really does depend on your postcode. Sadly,
I think that's the same with
Yeah.
the diagnosis is for various different neurodiversities, from what I can understand as well. From various different groups that I'm part of, it seems to be the same message that's coming across time after time. Same with the HCPs as well. Different local authorities have different track records. Yeah, it's frustrating to say the least.
Definitely. But going back to Marlon, Nicola, and he seems to have such a positive outlook on life and such determination. What does sort of the morning routine or the day-to-day routine look like for you? Is there certain things that you have to sort of support him with each day? And has he sort of been able to do more things independently as sort of the years have gone on as well?
yeah, we really, I mean, I guess it's physical things. So it's for him, like getting dressed. You know, we have a constant battle with him because he's just lazy and he wants us to dress him. So I'm constantly fighting this, like, do I just do it myself because it's quicker, or do I enable to do it? You know, fighting with that. Um, and then like getting in and out of places, because he, when he's indoors, he'll mostly crawl around, but like getting him in and out of the car, or like helping him on with his shoes and his coat, you know, things like that. But yeah, we really try and like encourage him to be as independent as he can. And I think you've got to do a little bit daily to do that. So we have a weekly physio. After his surgery, we were having physio 3 times a week, so it was quite intense. And then that's dropped off a little bit. But we have a weekly physio session. Sometimes it's at home, sometimes it's at school. He partakes in PE with the rest of his class, and it's slightly adapted the things that he does. And then we have like a standing frame at home. I mean, the recommendation is that we use it every day, but we just can't fit that in the day because he's when he gets home from school. So we use that at the weekend, and actually recently we've had one in the school so that they can use it at school as well. And then he has a little walking frame, and the toilet frame, as I said, for the toilet again, that's great because it just gives him some stability that he can get on and off the toilet independently, which has been really helpful.
I guess it's important as well, because you mentioned when you were on your holiday that you're still able to carry him and lift him, but there will become a point where actually he's too heavy. And I don't know about you, but I think we're kind of getting to that point with Max where actually it's kind of backbreaking.
Yes.
So to empower him to kind of be able to do these things by himself on his own is important.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
like you say, I mean, I'm guilty of this massively, of actually I don't have time to allow you to dress yourself in the morning because I need to get you to school, so I just do it for him. And yeah, one of my things over the summer is to try and get him to start dressing himself when we're not under so much kind of time pressure to get him to school, because I know we need to do it, and I know that with practice and support he will get there. But it's finding the time, isn't it? And like you have all these best intentions, but life gets in the way. You're so busy trying to do everything.
But
So
it's your husband into at it, because I found, like, my husband, he's much firmer, like, whereas I'll just
we're the other way around. Oh no, Matt's dad will do everything for him. Yeah.
like, see, I struggled with that, but I know that it's the right thing to do, is to let him, to let him suffer and to learn it. Whereas I'm a bit soft, and I've been guilty of just jumping in because it's quicker. But yeah, I think I'm trying to think about the long run.
It's difficult though, because they are still really young, but you can kind of see when they go to school actually some of these skills I know when Max first went to school, like a lot of the things that the teachers were talking to me about him being kind of school ready and stuff. And I think this is quite hot at the moment in about talking about children being school ready. But I know it's saying to me like, can you put his coat on? And can you do this? Can you do this? And I'm thinking, no, 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 no. I think, okay, need to practice that, need to practice that. And sometimes I'm thinking, is it because we haven't helped him and supported him enough, or is it because of the fact, that he struggles with some of these things because his gross motor and fine motor is a little, and coordination and like zips and such like is a bit affected. So I'm constantly thinking, are we doing enough to support him but not, and push him but not push him so far that it really just frustrates him because he's like, actually I can't do this.
I think it's most children, they just don't have patience with anything, so if it's so tricky they just don't bother.
Yeah, that's definitely
I think we're all guilty of it.
I'm not so good at cutting up he said, I'm not so good at cutting up my potatoes, so so and so does it for me at school. And I'm thinking, okay, we need to practice that.
Yeah, I think we can all be guilty of it because it's that fine line, isn't it, of are they struggling or are they capable and they're just being a little bit lazy.
Yeah, I know, a bit cheeky.
Yeah. Boys are lazy, as I've been told by friends. Boys are the lazy ones, I find. So yeah, especially having boys.
Oh yeah, Alex will just lie there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he will. But my daughter is fiercely independent and wants to do things for herself. I dared to take a yogurt pot lid off for her the other day, and she threw the yogurt at me. But not because she was just frustrated because she just wanted to do it herself. How's the relationship been like between Marlon and his sister? So obviously you've spoken about the fact that she walked easily, and she obviously doesn't have some of the same challenges that Marlon has.
I was really worried about that as well, that it would affect Marlon. And I just thought, is he going to feel, I thought, let's try not to pay too much attention to her walking, or, I didn't want him to feel bad about it. But again, he just took it in his stride. And I think, I don't really remember it ever being mentioned. It was just like, that's her and that's who she is. And, I guess he felt happy for her. I didn't ever really, he's not very competitive with her, I guess, because they're so different. She's a bit of a wild child, I think, maybe second child. And I also think because Marlon does need more support with things, she perhaps has been left to be independent. She's had to be more independent. And it probably is in her nature as well. But, she's, for the most part, she's kind of does her own thing and she's happy. And sometimes I notice that she gets a bit jealous of him. So she'll just try and get the attention back to herself, which makes her a bit even more wild. But they have such a lovely relationship. Like, she's very active, and she'll jump all over him. The only thing she'll sometimes do is she'll like take his toys and run away and tease him. But then he'll like chase after her, like crawling around behind her, and they're kind of at the same speed now. So it's funny, and they laugh. They chase each other around, literally. It's really funny. But when she gets bigger, because she'll be able to outpace him, I'm going to have to make sure that I ensure that she doesn't keep doing that. But no, they've got a really nice relationship. And I think that was one of the reasons that I'm so keen to have a second child, because I think their relationship, that will outlive my relationship with him. So, I can already see that they're going to be best of friends. And it's so lovely. I think whether you've got, son parenting issues or not, seeing siblings bond is so nice. And I think when you've got a son child, it's again even more of a lovely feeling to see them love each other so much.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
Oh, that's so lovely. Nicola, what advice do you have for other parents who maybe have recently received a diagnosis for their child with cerebral palsy, or who are new to the journey? What advice would you have?
I think firstly, I'd say take your time with it and sit with it for a bit, because I certainly tried to go into like action mode. What can I do? What can I fix? Just take your time with it and feel all the emotions and let yourself cry and talk to people. I think I was really surprised. Some of my friends just felt uncomfortable talking about it. And then other people were really supportive and I could talk to them openly. So I think try and find those people that you can talk to. Try and find your tribe, and find someone that you can vent with. Like, I have had so many conversations with my mum where I'm just like, I can't believe this and that and rah, rah. but it's so good for me to get it all out. And my mum always listens. And afterwards, I always feel a little bit like, ooh, okay. Because I think if you don't let it all out, you just sit with it, and then you sort of sit with anger and frustration. So definitely find, your way to get it out. And then I'd say, I'm sure plenty of people have said this, but trust your gut as a mum. I think what I found hard with medical opinion is that it is just opinion. It's very rare that you'll get black or white. It's, different specialists' opinions on your child. So we've had like contrasting opinions, like the surgery that we had another clinician tell us, don't get that surgery, it's going to be terrible for your child, and long term this and that and the other. And then another clinician that's like, it's the best thing ever. So you just have to make your own mind up. And I think you have to just take that with a pinch of salt, because they are opinions. It's not finite, and it's not, a dead cert for your child. And then I think push back and challenge. I've challenged lots of things over the years for Marlon, either like medicine that people have recommended or not recommended, or like the surgery that I just knew would be good for him. And then also, appointments. We get quite a lot of appointments that I just turn down, and I say like, no, we don't need anything right now. We don't want to come to another pediatrician, because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
And unless there's something that I can see as being beneficial to Marlon, then I just don't want to do it. Because especially with physio, like we often get asked to do these they're called CPIP assessments, which basically they just take about an hour and a half to 2 hours. They measure like so many different things, but then nothing comes off the back of it. It's almost just record keeping for them. So I'm just like, no, sorry, let's just do the normal physio session, because that benefits him.
Yeah.
So I would say, push back on things that you don't think are beneficial for you or your child, and trust your gut and know what's right for them. And find your tribe, find people that can lift you up, and people that you can share things with, because it can be a hard journey. So sharing that and talking it has always been really helpful for me. Don't let it rob you of the happiness of your child. Like I think it's really important to just enjoy the years where they're younger and enjoy that special bond. Don't always try to be fixing them or pursuing a treatment or, trying to better their outcomes. That just enjoy them for what they are, which is your little bundle of joy that you're going to love, regardless of what they're going through and what the diagnosis might be. So just try and enjoy it.
You know what, you said there that we'd had different journeys, but every single one of those pieces of advice would resonate with me. I think Amy you would probably confirm is exactly the same for you.
Yeah.
Even though they're very different diagnoses, it's the same pieces of advice.
Yeah, excellent advice. Nicola, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us, and for sharing Marlon's journey. He just seems to be an amazing little boy and doing so well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's so incredible, and I love listening to it. And that's like you were saying, the advice that I get from this podcast has been great, even though they're very different circumstances. So thank you for all your work, ladies.
Oh, thank you.